Oh, look at this. Oh, is that right? Building rooftops, eh? Yeah. I know someone else who really quite likes building rooftops. Quite a bit.
あの時屋上で何をやっていたのかな。
ちゃんとお話しなさい、マルティン。
Martin.
1階のひさしに当たって植木に引っかからなかったら死んでたかもしれないのよ。ちゃんと先生にお話しして。もうこれ以上こんなバカなことが続かないようにしなくちゃ。
私はお子さんのカウンセリングに来てるんです。
わかってます。わかってます。けど先生。
Fair enough, right?
ちょっと外でお話ししましょう。
I mean, that's the right approach, but you can understand from a mother's perspective. Hey, Dita.
リータ、そこでおとなしくしてるんだぞ。病室の中に入ったりするなよ。
先生のお孫さんですか。
あ、いや、ちょっと預かってるんですよ。
Of course he's gonna go in. Oh, yeah. I hope this anime gets praise for its production. You know, it's not flashy, it's not, but it's really quite functional and effective, and you know, it looks good. Especially the expressions, you know, that's clearly Urasawa's forte. Ooh. You know, I've seen a similar scene before, really early on in the anime. Excuse me.
Yeah.
There's not much going on there. This feels so authentic, doesn't it? I suppose you just got your answer there, buddy. Just like that.
怒られたからってなんだよ。別に怒られることなんて怖くないさ。
I mean, yeah.
言ってた通りだ。
Just like he
帰
said.
ったら外に出てごらん。世界が変わっているよ。うん。世界が変わったんじゃなくて、僕が変わった。
After that near-death experience, and I'm pretty sure I know what he means by it.
だって僕は選ばれたんだから。
This has Johan all over it, doesn't it? The hand of Johan. Oh. Back around the time Richard used to be alive.
世界がこんな退屈だなんて。
There is no fear of death. No fear of consequences, of course. Yeah, this is Johan, 100%.
怖いものなんかないからさ。
Look how good that looks. Oh, this could be interesting, actually. But I have to hold on and get a bit of confirmation before. Don't. Oh, he's a brat.
ほら怖がってるぜ。
やめろよ。
I mean, how strong is this kid?
痛くないよ。助けてくれよ。いいだろう。生かしといてやろう。
Let's go voice acting.
屋上から落ちた時怖かったかって聞いたろ。怖いわけないだろ。あれは遊びなんだから。
That explains the
遊びって。
no fear of consequences.
だって何人も死んでるんだよ。
楽しい いんだよ。遊びだもん。誰もいないビルの屋上のヘリに
Yeah, this is 100% Johan's doing. It's got his fingerprints all over it.
互いに一歩一歩近づく。これは決闘なんだ。
Yeah, this is disgusting, man. This is disturbing.
なんでそんなこと。
Oh, the score.
生き残った方は選ばれたものだ。
And yeah, he said, I'm chosen.
言ってる意味わかんないかな。
No.
生き残った方はまた遊びができるんだよ。
Okay, I thought he's about to say, I'll show you.
遊びって。
I think he is actually saying that.
楽しいぞ。運命に選ばれた者だけが遊び続けることができるんだ。わからないか。君は僕らの仲間かと思ったよ。
Dieter, be careful. Careful. He continues to follow him, but I think this is out of... Oh, beautiful stuff again. Empathy.
まさか屋上に行くつもりじゃ。
He wants to help him.
選ばれた
And
者。
look at his condition.
優秀な者が生き残る。あの人がそうさ。
あの人って。
この遊びを教えてくれた人さ。
誰なの。
He is him.
僕ら優秀な子供たちの。
Oh, is it? He might be one of the orphans then,
早
right?
く来いよ。
僕いいよ。
誰にやられたその傷。君の親かい。来いよ。来て見てみろ
Oh
よ。
my god, he's done a number on this kid. And many others like him, from the sounds of it.
立って目をつぶって歩いてみろよ。立ってよ。
It feels like the influence of Tenma
わかったよ。
and the hand of
君
Johan.
の言ってることよくわかるよ。
Yeah, he can. He's been there.
世界は真っ暗だと思ってた。明日は真っ暗だと思ってた。
And then Tenma showed up. Showed him that it's a
君は
lie.
何が好物だ。僕はこの前とっても美味しいソーセージを食べた。でも死んだらもう二度と食べられなくなる。
Simple pleasures.
僕はサッカーが好きだ。でも死んだらボール蹴れなくなる。
弱虫。
ライギワイン先生が好きだ。でも死んだら会えなくなる。怖いものなんかなくならない。だから大人になるんだって言ってた。明日はいい日だって。
Tenma said that to him, right? Okay, maybe
死ん
a bit
だ
of a
ら
breakthrough.
死んだらテーマに会えなくなる。
Oh no. Okay, so he's come to his senses. The crazy thing is he actually kind of looks like Johan as well from the early days of the anime, right? Back at Tenma's
待って
hospital.
ちゃダメだ。ゆっくり膝ついて。られないよ。
No one can.
僕はヨハンみたいになれない。
Just-
ヨハンはもっとすごい遊びをしてるんだ。ヨハンはもうすぐ殺されるって言ってた。
told him that.
もうすぐ日本人に撃ち殺されるって言ってた。
Yeah, this should make a lot of sense to Dieter, right? Wow. That's a lot of information, though.
僕はちゃんと目をつぶって屋上の端っこ歩いたんだ。
Another one.
本当だよ。ちゃんと歩いたんだ。ちっとも怖くなかったよ。それで目を開けたら向こうから歩いてきてるはずのヨアヒムが消えてたんだ。見たんだよ。人が死ぬ瞬間をこの目で見たんだ。本当に人は死ぬんだ。
They have no fear of
じ
death.
ゃあどうぞ。あなたからも一言言ってやってください、
Yeah,
ね。
he's doing the opposite.
あなたの言うことならこの子を聞くみたいだ
That's
から。
that's a problem, though.
ねえ、この前言ってたすごい遊びはまだなの？もうすぐ撃ち殺されるかもしれない
My
って
God.
言ってたじゃないか。ドキドキするよ。いつ頃なの？いつその日本人は撃ってくるの？ねえ、ヨハン。
ヘルマン・ヘッセ荒野の狼の初版
First edition.
これはホフマンの夜の画集の初版
First edition
絵
again.
で詩集も全巻揃っている
Ooh.
なんともはやミュンヘン大学フリードリッヒ・エマヌエル校図書館館長の私でさえ目のくらむような蔵書ですな
So is this...
私は大学へ行けずに独学でここまで来た人間だ。せめて本だけでも読んでおく。
Okay, it's his personal collection. First editions, right, of course.
私どもの図書館に寄贈していただけるとは。いや、感謝の言葉もございません。私は目が見えなくなり、
Right.
もはや読むことができない。この書斎で眠らせているより、学生たちの手元にある方がためになるだろう。
Okay.
貴重な本の数々ですが、一般閲覧も考えております。セレモニーの件もありますので、ぜひ。
A gathering.
招待客のチェックはくれぐれも厳重にお願いします。そうだな、ヨハン。
Yeah, Johan's got it under control. Of course. I'm sure Johan's the one who floated the idea to Carl, or at least opened a discussion.
保存に最適な温度、湿度はもちろん、盗難、火災に関しても万全だ。
Safe from fire and theft, you say?
人類の財産だな、ヨハン。人類の財産か。
Ooh, someone watching?
こちらの中央ホールで蔵書寄贈のセレモニーを行う予定だ。
父も喜んで出席すると思います。な、ヨハン。
Oh, is Tenma here? Ooh,
どうしたヨハン。ちょっと失礼し。
something drew his attention to the upper floor there. Is this him on the upper floor now? Ah.
何かお探しですか？
Oh.
いけない。
I like her design. You know, even look at her nose. It's a really unique. Yeah, look at that.
私、おっちょこちょいでいつもこんな調子なんです。あ、そうそうこれ。私のおすすめの絵本なんですけど。それが気に入
Ooh,
ったん
something
です。
caught his attention.
あら、いい絵ね。誰の本かしら。ちょっと失礼。エミル・シェーベ？モラビア出版。チェコのプラハにある出版社ね。
Prague.
チェコにはいい絵本作家がたくさんいますからね。
Czech Republic.
でも、シェーベって作家は聞いたことないわね。
Johan and Nina come from there, don't they?
あまり有名じゃない人かしら。
Whoa.
どうなさったの？
Whoa, whoa. Yeah, this is not Johan putting on an act. Whoa. Okay, this is from his past, from his childhood. Whoa. What? Whoa. Is this the next day? Oh my goodness. Now I gotta look at the cover. I kinda gotta look at the illustration on the cover. I think I have a hunch there. I'll have to go back and look at it. Yeah. Look at that. It's right in the open. Anyone can see that it's a gathering. Even the presentation here. Ooh. Oh. Oh, that's the reason he's looking up. Johan.
ここだ。
Ah, wow. Johan just knew this is the spot. He's guiding Tenma.
ここから彼を
Okay, let's get into it, folks. First of all, I've got to say, it just feels so damn good to be back. It does. I feel like, 3 episodes in now, I'm really truly feeling that flow again, right? Really dialed in, feeling like I'm really quite dialed in. Once again, listen, I can still use a bit of recap perhaps for maybe the first 15 episodes, first 15, 16 episodes. I'll certainly make some time for that, allocate some time for that. But, in terms of coming back to it after a bit of a break, I feel like now I'm truly kind of really in the zone, of course, that's one of the concerns about that type of break, a break of that length, rather, that, you do kind of lose a bit of that connection, that flow that you do have going. It's just how it is, isn't it? You can't really avoid that. But the only thing you can really do is just get right back into it, right? And just, go all in. I mean, to be honest, I feel like the anime itself, the story itself, Urasawa's writing, it just kind of immediately brought me back in, It didn't feel like a chore. It didn't feel like I'm struggling a bit to find that rhythm, So, yeah, I think it's fair to say 3 episodes in, I'm just really quite excited to be back because, the things that are happening now, it's exciting stuff. It's compelling stuff. I mean, this episode right here might just be one of the standouts, one of the most important episodes of the anime, right? Because it has a significant turning point built within, right? I saw it right at the conclusion. I'll get to that, of course. But the actual conclusion, of course, Dr. Tenma shows up. I like how it's kind of been reversed at this point, hasn't it? In the last few episodes, I've been seeing much more of Johan, or, in this mini arc, I suppose. I've been seeing much more of Johan, more, just, so much more than I'm used to seeing of Johan. And it kind of flipped it, didn't it? A bit, at least. Tenma, I'm kind of seeing less and less of. I mean, yes, just really quite recently, even in the last episode, the entire episode is dedicated to Tenma, essentially. But, here you see, once again, he kind of takes a backseat and shows up right in the conclusion, right? And there's been a few moments like that in this mini arc, right? Showing up for Reichwein right at the end of that episode, right? Holding Roberto off long enough so they can both get out of there. And I'm sure Roberto, that big creep, I'm sure he's around, right? He'll show up soon enough again, especially because of everything that's being set up here, right? In that library, the whole book collection donation ceremony, right? So I'm sure, that Roberto is going to be playing his part as well. He's always lingering. He's always around, the big brute. Because, listen, ultimately, I mentioned Tenma showing up at the end there, and, it appears that Tenma believes he's found the perfect vantage point, right? But ultimately, he doesn't realize it, but ultimately it's pretty clear cut here that this is exactly how Johan wanted it to play out. I mean, he guided Tenma to this exact point, to this exact spot. You see that almost immediately upon, entering that hall, he did his own scouting. I'm speaking of Johan at this point, and immediately clocking that perfect vantage point, right? Of course, initially I thought something else is drawing him to, the upper floor, right? Especially because the focus, or at that point, right, it felt like the focus is on the bookshelves rather than the actual, the railing and that spot specifically, right? The open shot, or the spot that does kind of allow that open shot, that potential open shot. So I, immediately thought, oh, is something, did Johan do something up there? Did he end up spotting someone? Hell, at one point I thought maybe, Tenma might be in there already. And, maybe it's one of those moments of Johan kind of understanding that as well, that, in one of those rows, Tenma might be hiding right now, right? And, I initially thought that because of the really, specific shot selection, right? The angle from above, from the railing. Usually, I call that the stalker shot. You see that quite a bit in this anime as well. So to me, it felt like it was, it was from maybe Tenma's perspective or someone else's perspective, maybe it could have been Lunge, who knows, right? But of course it wasn't. But at that point, I thought maybe, something else is up. That, maybe Johan knows there's something up there. It doesn't even have to be someone actually, watching him or anything. My mind at that point was just kind of racing with random ideas. I mean, at that point, it felt like there's something else going on there. I mean, listen, in hindsight, maybe not that specific area, but, the upper floor, something really insane did happen, right? Something up there. So, you can even kind of look at it as, I don't know, a pull, a draw from the upper floor, right? And I'm speaking of that book, of course. I mean, ultimately, it meant something else entirely that he's looking up there. But, you could still kind of look at it as the pull of the book, right? Calling to Johann, almost as if the book itself can sense Johann being around, right? The pull of the past calling to him. And just to reiterate, yes, I understand that's not the reason he's looking up there, right? I just explained. But, it's still nice to just kind of discuss these things because the book itself had quite the impact on Johann, right? For the first time, I see Johann bested, right? And he's bested by something that appears to be from his past, from his childhood, right? There's just too much there for it not to be, some traumatic connection to his past. Again, as a child, specifically. Given the nature of the book itself as well. And of course, I'm really quite excited to discuss and dissect and speculate about the connotations of the crazy things I've seen here. And I'll get to that. But let's kind of focus a bit on the setup, right? The whole, coming together, because now it really kind of truly feels like this is the spot, right? And it's not, and I'm not speaking of just Tenma, right? Trying to have a go at Johann. I mean, Tenma, he seems really quite resolved at this point. I mean, I'm sure, he's not going to kill Johann here. Even if he tries to, I don't think Johann's actually going to end up dying here. Again, it's still in the 30s, so logically it's just not going to happen. And realistically, it wouldn't make sense at all for Johann to die in the next few episodes anyways. But, the setup is there. And, not just Tenma possibly having a shot on Johann. And of course, Johann's going to know exactly the spot that that Tenma is aiming from. There's other things at play here, right? Because in attendance are also going to be Carl and his father. And there's all kinds of, hints and foreshadowing and setup from earlier in the arc as well, right? That could be at play now. And, this coming together easily could include people like Lunge, who is meant to be in Munich soon enough, right? Maybe he's here already. I'm not sure yet, but he is meant to show up at some point soon, really soon. Last episode I saw Nina. Nina's around as well. So, all the major ensemble cast, or, the major characters of this anime, of this story, even, the major characters of this mini arc, again, Carl and his father, right? And, even people like Lotte, again, quite a bit of focus on her in the last episode. It all feels like everyone's a part of this now, this thing that's about to take place. And ultimately, as always, it feels like it's all according to Johann's plans, right? There's only one thing, for the first time in a long time, in a rare moment, he is not in control once he does come across that book, right? It completely just bamboozles him, takes him by surprise, and yeah, it's a really jarring sight, isn't it? It really is. It truly is to see Johann like this. But also, I know he's really quite disturbed in that moment, so there is a level of sympathy for Johann there, though, at times I find it really difficult to sympathize or empathize with Johann. And again, that is by design, especially given, the first half of this episode, his run-ins, his meetings, his hangout sessions with these orphans. Essentially, they've set this up for some time now, right? He spends a lot of time with children, but, here specifically, it feels like, maybe not, maybe Martin's not an orphan. I did see his mom, and then later the other kid, but even that kid's mom came in to offer a drink. But, listen, it's possible these are adoptive parents. That actually really could be the case, right? Because, this is not by chance. Johann is hand selecting and going after a really specific type of child, or even people, even before this, the entire, 33 episode run so far that I've experienced, you can see the type of people he targets, right? Nothing's by chance. I mean, this isn't brainwashing from square one. These are hand-selected people that have troubled pasts, right? That are susceptible to Johan's charms, I suppose. I mean, at the most basic level. Johan is this cooler, older person, right? And all of us know that, younger boys, younger children, they can kind of look up to these types, right? I mean, it applies to all of us, right? All of us have had those experiences, thinking that older cousins are really quite cool, and, just kind of the idea, the excitement of getting to that age yourself, right? You see it at play here. And, let's not forget Dieter and the role he plays in all of this. I think, there's a really interesting dynamic at play here in that first half, right? Even though Johan and Tenma are not present, they are present in a different perspective, from a different perspective, right? Through both Martin and Dieter. Yin and yang, light and darkness, all of that, it's at play here. But, you see earlier that Martin, ultimately, that facade, that, that mask that he does try to put on, that brave face, that, I'm this edgelord, nothing scares me, and, life is meaningless, and it's just boring. Again, I'll get into that in a bit, but, just to focus on that aspect of it, the moment it becomes really real, really quite real, him potentially, dying within, the next few moments, it slips, that mask slips. At the end of the day, he is terrified. And, he's also upset that he can never be like Johan, right? He feels embarrassed in that moment, but ultimately he doesn't even realize how alike he is to Johan, right? Simply because Johan is human, right? I know that seems kind of like a silly thing to say, but a figure of speech, essentially, right? Seeing Johan react in that manner and having that episode, essentially, I mean, it's more than an episode. The man just blacks out. He faints from this, right? It's a full-on, fully blown panic attack. And it's, again, a jarring sight to see him like this. Someone who's all about optics, someone who's all about being calm and composed and always in control of the situation and just everything that's around him and about him, right? He's always been about optics. I mean, you see that he's almost kind of working on the lady, the young girl there as well, right? They kind of lock eyes as Johan is really close up to her face. But listen, that easily just could be him being really close by, right? And just him being handsome. It doesn't mean that he's trying something here. But, you never know. Johan's always plotting something, right? But ultimately, he got bamboozled. And listen, it's an exciting and compelling thought that, he can be affected, right? Like I said, he's quite disturbed, and, I do kind of sympathize with him in that moment, but it really is quite exciting that, yes, Johan is human, right? He does feel. Again, a figure of speech. I'm not saying that he is a supernatural being or anything, though, the presentation is there. He is presented like that, as that sometimes, right? That's just his aura. That's his nature. That's how in control he is. That at times it does feel like there's a supernatural, element to that character, to that person, right? Again, by design, I believe, but not supernatural elements, literally. But I suppose I might as well just kind of stick to this talking point now, because it is essentially the most significant aspect of this episode. It just is, to see Johan like this, to finally get a peek behind that elusive curtain. It is exciting. It is just intriguing, isn't it? Right? I'm not going to call it a crack, because, it's essentially kind of alluding to, Johan's true nature as well, the one that might have been suppressed. I mean, essentially, it really felt like this panic attack is brought on because of memories that just kind of came rushing back. The types of memories that you suppress, right? Because again, you just look at the reaction and just how much it impacted him, right? And affected him to the point that, again, he blacks out. Now, that is another thing that's at play here. Someone actually saw him in this state, right? Johan's not the type who allows himself to be, seen in a different light, a light that he's not controlling, right? A persona, again, it's all about optics, right? He's not into any of that, right? But it happened in front of someone, right? So, I'm kind of concerned for this young girl at the library. I mean, she's around the same age as Johan, but yeah, she saw all of this. But the thing is, if he blacked out, and he is out, you have to expect that, there is going to be a follow-up, right? Because essentially it did kind of show me the next morning, I believe, right? And you see Tenma walk in and go to the spot. So I'm guessing at that point, he's been taken to a clinic, to a hospital. And, I'm sure by that point, Carl and his father probably know as well. So people are going to know about this. So it'll be interesting to see how Johan handles this. Because listen, again, since the beginning of this anime, the beginning of this story, this is the first time Johan is probably not even able to explain it to himself, right? Really truly understand it himself, the reaction that was brought out of him because of this book. And, the things that he saw in this book, the illustrations that he saw in this book, right? I'm really beginning to feel like there's another, hidden in plain sight aspect at play here, right? It is a reoccurring theme of this anime, of this story, right? I mean, there was a title just really quite recently, Hidden in Plain Sight, I believe the last episode as well, right? And again, it really is quite applicable to the character of Johan, right? That character archetype as well. So, okay, I'll get into that in a bit. Let's kind of, handle the immediate aftermath of this. But going back to the girl that's helping him, if you look at it from Johan's perspective, he must feel embarrassed, right, by this sudden onset of symptoms that he had no control over, right? And, again, Johan has an image to maintain. I mean, that's a critical and significant component of this persona of his. So I don't know. I don't know if, the girl's in danger, or if that's not really going to be a thing that's going to be at play, right? But, before I go any further, it's something that I'm kind of thinking about, given Johan's really specific reaction to this, something that's clearly from his childhood. And, they've made it really quite clear, it's from the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and all of that. And, in prior episodes, I believe, the Kinderheim 511 episode, the lady at the other orphanage, at Nina's orphanage, gives us a bit of the backstory that both Nina and Johan were taken into custody around the border, right? So they do come from there. And then, of course, the lady or the girl at the library confirms a few more details for us, right? Gives us a few more details, right? It came from a publisher or a publishing firm or house located in Prague, right? And it's written by someone named Emil Scherb, I believe. So, all the details are there. The connections are there to, Czech Republic, Prague, and all of that. Johan and Nina come from there. So I feel that it's pretty clear cut in its presentation that indeed this is a book from Johan's childhood, but also, the point I was trying to make a little bit earlier, it could be from their childhood. That includes Nina. So this kind of takes me back to my initial point. I need to get Nina's reaction to this. I need Nina to find out about this, right? Because that could be fascinating. Her input on this, her insight on this, because I feel like she must know about this book as well, right? The significance of this book or the illustrations in the book. And again, I feel like, I might have already seen many of these illustrations already. Even though, it's presented as this mysterious book. And, other than maybe the cover, I don't really get much of a look inside, right? But, even the cover, if you really look at it, yeah, it's really quite similar to illustrations that I've seen already. Illustrations of really specific characters I've seen already. And of course, I'm alluding to the story, the ongoing story that's being told in the ending of this anime, right? The end credits. I believe that is the book. I believe those are the illustrations, right? And the thing is, long before this, I think I already speculated about these creatures or monsters that are presented in these stories and, the trajectory that they are on, within that narrative, right? I believe I've, linked both of them to Nina and Johan and their journeys and how they have to split. One goes into one direction, one into another direction, different trajectories and different, approach to life and, outlook on life. But, also it might not be, a case of those two splitting up, and each one kind of, functioning as one of the siblings, Nina and Johan. That also could be, two parts of Johan splitting up. And, a little bit earlier, I mentioned that, I could use a bit of a recap from the first 15 or so episodes. Yeah, that's another thing that's become even more enticing and intriguing all of a sudden. I mean, it already was, right, given just the nature of it. The story being told there in the end credits. But now, after this, I'm going all the way back and I'm really dissecting that even more than before, because I really do feel like that's an important aspect of all of this, right? Especially if it got that type of reaction out of Johan. Now, I'm not saying the contents of the book or the illustrations themselves might be the reason for this. I feel like it's more so, the reminder of it, right? Something from his past. Again, that being the really specific object that is serving as a reminder to his past and those illustrations, I suppose. But, I'm sure that there is a personal link to this story and the illustrations and all of that. But ultimately, it's pretty clear that it is something that he completely forgot about, or, made the choice somehow, made the effort to forget about. But, going back to my point about Nina potentially getting to find out about this and that being really exciting, of course, I would love that. And I hope it happens. But, I'm not able to really cross that bridge yet, because I'm not sure how exactly it'll happen. I mean, she's around, right? Because of the last episode. So, I mean, it's not impossible. I'm excited about that possibility, that it doesn't feel impossible that she can find out, right? There could be, I don't know, a route to Nina somehow. It's not impossible at this point. And I think, realistically speaking, at some point, getting insight from Nina about this book, I feel like that's inevitable as well, right? Given that, they are twins. And yeah, they share the same childhood, that they have been through a lot of this, same traumatic experiences, right? And, for someone like Johan, it's been clear that, he's been like this even before Kinderheim 511, right? So it goes all the way back to their time, even, before coming to Germany, right? In Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic and all of that, right? So there's a lot of episodes ahead of me, right? So there's a good chance I'll probably get even more backstory at some point. I mean, that's an expectation, essentially. But, it's exciting. The thought of that is exciting. But, going back to actually coming across the book and just the really sudden and jarring nature of it, and, the book essentially taking him by surprise, almost as if it's a living thing. I personified it a little bit earlier as something that has a pull as well, right? But, I think it's by design, this feeling, this idea of the book itself almost, reaching out and grabbing Johan by the throat. I mean, it just kind of felt like that to me, the imagery that is kind of playing out in my mind, right? That this completely had control over Johan. Johan's at this book's mercy, or at the mercy of the things that this book represents, the illustrations and everything that it represents, from his upbringing, his childhood, again, his traumatic childhood at that. So yeah, I think I feel like it is by design that, the book itself is almost being presented as this living thing, this living entity, for me at least. At the end of the day, I should only speak for myself. But, the really interesting thing about that is that that's actually one of the symptoms of a panic attack, right? That feeling of someone grabbing you by the throat, right? Or feeling like you're being choked. You're struggling to breathe, struggling for air, right? So, it kind of checks out, doesn't it? I feel like it is by design, right? The imagery that I'm kind of getting from this, from a visual standpoint, in my mind at least, and, the more, technical and scientific explanation for the panic attack itself. I mean, it's a full-on trauma-induced panic attack, right? All the symptoms are there. And like I said a little bit earlier, it's equal parts intriguing and exciting, but then also at the same time a little bit concerning, right? I spoke of sympathizing with Johan, and I feel like it is by design as well, right? To make it happen at this point of this mini arc, right? Johan being targeted really soon by Tenma. I feel like, it is this opening here to sympathize a little bit with Johan, right? That, he's on the chopping block. Ultimately, yes. I don't believe Tenma is going to be able to kill him, or, even if he does somehow, manage to pull the trigger, it's not actually going to come off. I'm so sure that other things are going to be at play, right? Listen, one thing that feels like almost kind of like a lock-on to me is it's about to be bedlam in that place at some point. Or, I mean, some point soon, right? And I'm speaking of, the get-together and all of that, the coming together. And, Johan's all about the big plans, the big picture. That's one of the main things about this arc, right? Elevating himself to that position, right-hand man, and, again, being in Carl's ear as well, befriending Carl and all of that. This seems like the ideal situation for him as well in terms of potentially getting rid of Mr. Schubert, or both Mr. Schubert and Carl, right? So, of course, that leaves Johann perhaps in complete control of that, empire. I mean, Urasawa has set up other plans for Johann as well, right? Or Johann's other plans, elevating himself to a really significant position, right? And, really significant, almost at a political level, or having, influence at a political level as well. So, that, I feel like that is going to be at play here. It's a perfect storm. It's a perfect coming together. And there's other things at play. I kind of alluded to earlier, right? Hints from earlier in the mini arc. And even here in this episode, in that one scene, you've got the head librarian of the Munich University, speaking of things like, it's safe from theft and fire, right? Fire. That's not the first time fire's been brought up, right? All the way back in the early days of this mini arc, maybe even the first episode of this mini arc, the Thursday Boy, I believe, right? Maybe that's the second episode, but it's really early on. You get my point, right? The Thursday Boy, and again, the big twist there, the big fake out there is that ultimately it wasn't Johann that was the Thursday Boy, right? Thursday Boy is the other guy who he's found dead in his room, and Johann actually ends up being the Friday Boy. Great episode. In that episode, there's a really decent amount of time allocated to, the meeting, the coming together of that club. And indeed, I do believe that is Constantine, right? Who is reciting this, prophecy, I suppose. I'm not sure that's the exact term that's being used there, but I'm kind of, blanking on the term I'm looking for here. And of course, there's talk of the god of destruction, and, they're kind of contemplating, who would think that the god of destruction is going to come here, right, of all places. And then before that, the more significant aspect of it, I think, is, the talk of the book being engulfed in flames, I believe, right? The interpretation that I believe Constantine gives is that he believes that the school is going to burn, right? That's his interpretation of it at that point. He straight up just said that. He believes that, right? And like I said, there's a really significant amount of time, or at least a decent amount of time allocated to that scene of just these randoms at the time, right? So that is going to be at play, the whole fire aspect. And like I said on a few occasions already, this feels like a big gathering, a big coming together. And that's why I believe there is going to be bedlam in this place, right? And I do believe it's all according to Johann's plan. So it's, Tenma showing up there, even though it's really quite a public place. So I'm going to be honest, it's a bit of a head scratcher as well that Tenma thinks this is the perfect spot for it. I mean, yes, it's a perfect vantage point on Johann, from up there, but I'm kind of, thinking about the public aspect of it, right? It's so in the open. But listen, I don't think Tenma has any intentions of actually, killing Johann and trying to get out of there. He's not thinking about that. I mean, it's really quite clear. He's not really interested in exonerating himself, right? He's really quite dialed in, laser focused on this. Though, of course, it's not as easy as he thought initially, right? Once you do have the sniper in hand and you're looking through that scope, really up close, right? At Johann's face and other kids that show up in the scope as well. But yeah, I suppose if you look at it from that perspective that he's not really going to try to escape or anything, then yeah, it doesn't really matter that it's really public. But, public in the sense that, he could be spotted before he even sets up, or, once he sets up, he could be spotted. So, Tenma's not an idiot. I'm assuming that he'll find, even within that area, he'll try to disguise himself. I mean, ultimately, he is going to set himself in a manner that is going to allow him to not be seen, right? And gives him all the time that he needs to actually be focused and, land the shot, right? The shot that I don't think is ever going to actually land or anything, but you get my point. But, once again, the pull of the book itself and that scene is far too strong for me to move on. And I do kind of have to go back to it and discuss it a bit further and speculate a bit further. You see that ultimately for Johann, it's a transportive experience, right? It took him to a place, to a time that he simply did not anticipate going to at this point in time, just strolling through a library, right? Trying to find a picture book for his other buddy, that he's brainwashing and experimenting on alongside some of these others. See, that segment and his, I don't know, presence and his influence on these children, that's, those are the types of things that make it really difficult to actually sympathize with Johann in any capacity. It's a little bit disgusting, actually. And of course, you have to give a lot of credit to the presentation of it, the production side of things. The voice acting is really top notch there, right? Because I'm not used to, hearing Johann like this, right? It's, again, another thing that's really quite jarring. Everything about him is so controlled, right? To the point that it makes you uneasy, right? This porcelain doll that is just always in control, all about the optics, and it's always so calm. And I mean, there is something kind of alluring about his voice as well, again, by design. But here, no. Here, all of that just kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? Here, it's just raw, and these noises are just kind of coming out of him, right? It felt like a completely different person, right? And I think that is the desired effect here, right? I think that is by design. And this kind of goes back to that idea of getting a rare peek behind the curtain, the elusive curtain, to another side of Johann, perhaps to the real Johann. But again, that's not a point I'm trying to really nail in at this point. It's a possibility, right? I don't want to, just kind of lock in on that just yet, because the Johann I've seen up until this point, this Johann, the one that's always kind of put together and in control, that is, a side of Johann. It's been a side of Johann for a long time, for a long, span of his life at this point. But there's more to it. There's always more to it behind the curtain. But yeah, from a production standpoint, from a performance standpoint, I think it's just perfect, right? It really is. It really kind of captures that sudden jarring episode of intense fear, right? Triggering this physical reaction, that is physically immobilizing him, essentially. All of that is really just quite debilitating for Johann at that point. And of course, he's trembling and shivering, much like how both him and Nina are found trembling and shivering at the border, right? And much like how Martin is experiencing a lot of the same, symptoms at that point, right? At the edge of that rooftop. Rooftops and Johann really kind of go hand in hand, don't they? They've shown me quite a bit of Johann and rooftops, be it Carl and Johann, be it the late Richard and Johann. But yeah, the thing is, for those who know, I'll try to tippy-toe around this in terms of spoilers, but for those who know, it really reminded me of Dexter, right? Again, if you know, you know. He goes through something really quite similar as well, past trauma suddenly being brought to the forefront, right? Triggered by something, right? There's a trigger in that show as well for Dexter specifically, and this appears to be the trigger for Johann, right? I'll leave it at that for Dexter. I don't want to, go any further. And I've got to say, I love that one shot, right? The sweeping shot, the pull-in, as it channels the immense, the rising tension within Johann, right? And then there's a sudden cut after he blacks out to the next scene. And at that point, it really kind of truly felt like the mask slipped and I saw another version of Johann. And ultimately, dimensional characters arouse our curiosity, right? By making us wonder how two sides of a contradiction can live within one person. And ultimately that, in turn makes them unpredictable and all the more fascinating, right? This is like textbook stuff, right? This applies to Johann. And, more often than not, the spark of contradiction that ignites a dimension, that comes from, the negative side of human nature, the side people try to hide. But, good writers, they tend to extract all of that for us, the audience. Excavate those private, hidden selves. But yeah, at this point, I'm just kind of left wondering about the illustrations. How come they're so traumatic to Johann? Because again, like I said earlier, I truly feel, and again, it's really quite clear as well that, it brought back, or those illustrations, or seeing those specific illustrations in that specific book brought back repressed memories, right? Triggered them loose and then some. And, I saw the outcome, the physical and internal reaction that it brought out of Johann, and showed me a totally different side of him. But yeah, like I said, it potentially makes these end credits even more compelling than before, right? given, a potential direct relation to Johann as a character, right? And his childhood, his possible trajectory. And again, this kind of has to be before Kinderheim 511. But, one element I kind of forgot to bring in about this, gathering, this coming together at the library is, these children, right? They could be at play, right? They might come into play. Because, they made it really quite clear. Johann's got quite a hold on them, right? They'll listen to Johann. I believe that one child's mom actually said something really quite similar, right? He'll listen to you. Please, I think she might have requested that he put some sense into his mind or something. But no, Mom, he's putting the opposite of that in his mind, right? He is guiding them in a really specific manner, really specific ideas, right? His own nihilistic outlook on life is being, again, not pummeled in to their minds, but it's being put there, and it's really quite effective, right? To them, it's like this really cool thing, right? To be in on an older, cooler person's mindset and the things that they're all about, right? Hell, it's right down to this idea of them even knowing that Johann is going to die soon, or that he does expect to die soon. And not only that, he goes as far to specify that it'll be a Japanese man that's going to kill him. So, ultimately, maybe he is also taking a really specific approach here, a bit of, I don't know. I'm not saying Johann is xenophobic, but, him specifying that, a Japanese man is going to be, killing me soon enough, or he's going to try to kill me. I think there is something there as well, right? Given some of the other things I've seen in this anime, right? Not surrounding Johann, but he's kind of attached to it, even if it isn't by choice, right? I think of the wolf and that storyline, and again, the significant names that are mentioned there, right? Just quite recently, you see it through the man in the forest and his past being brought up, and his experiences through that, right? Through that really specific time in history, and his own, personal history at that, and the things he ends up doing because of it. But again, to reiterate, I'm not saying that Johann is xenophobic, but I feel like there is something there in terms of specifying to these young children, a Japanese man is going to shoot me, he's going to kill me. But again, the kids are looking at it as a game, a much larger game that Johann's playing. Martin, as he breaks down, he mentions it as well, and then this child is all excited about this game at play for Johann. This idea that he might actually die soon. But yeah, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Johann's out here doing his own experiments, right? Listen, I know Johann is capable of a lot of things, even as a child in Kinderheim 511, right? He comes into that orphanage already as a really unique individual, or a kid or a child at that point. And he makes people there do some crazy things, right? As Hartman explains, around the time Dieter and Tenma finally, kind of come together. And, the rest is, of course, history. And Dieter has learned so much from Tenma. Tenma actually just, changed his life, his outlook on life. And, it resonated so much with Dieter, right? So much so that, just in a prior episode, he is just devastated at the notion of Tenma throwing his life away, that, he might murder someone. But yeah, here you see it at play, right? I think Dieter is actually quite brave here, even though, at times it might seem like he's being a little bit, I don't know, silly, or he's just being a little bit naive to just follow this child anywhere he asks him to go. I think it's more so out of concern. I think that's pretty clear. Dieter is really quite empathetic, and he sees that, this other child needs a bit of help, right? Especially because he's physically recovering as well. A bit of it is a little bit far-fetched, I'll be honest, how exactly a child that's in that condition is allowed to leave that hospital and no one stopped him or them, and then later in the streets no one has anything to say to that child. Now listen, I'm not saying that it's uncommon back in the day around that time, I suppose, for children of that age to just roam around. Even now it's not that uncommon, but I'm talking about a child in that condition, right? And he's able to kind of have a go at that homeless man, right? Trips him, and again literally pokes him and pokes fun at him as well, questions his life. Listen, let's be honest here. Martin's a brat, And I cannot stand bratty children. I just can't. But ultimately, I can't be too harsh because Johan has a hand to play in this, quite a major hand in directing this child and his outlook and his thought process, his nihilistic approach that Dieter understood. He tells him straight up on the rooftop, listen, I get everything you're saying. I've been there, man. I used to be there. In a dark place, just no hope for the future or, just even tomorrow. But then, of course, someone like Tenma came into his life, and then all the experiences he's had since, right? It's shown him that, life is worth living, growing up, becoming an adult, and all of that. And a lot of it is just simple pleasures, all the enjoyable small things that make life worth living. But yeah, not too long ago, Dieter found himself in the same dreary outlook, being a part of the same dreary, nihilistic outlook, right? Because again, he's in the company or in the care of Hartman, right? That the future is dark. But then, of course, someone like Tenma comes into his life as this, shining beacon of hope, as this shining light, helps him believe that that's a lie. He tells or shows Dieter that there is light in the world, right? That the future can be bright. This is again in response to Dieter really truly believing that, I thought the world is pitch black, right? That the future is pitch black. And he immediately recognizes that, Martin's caught up in the same outlook, in the same, dark cage. And for that reason, I'm really quite proud of Dieter here, right? He sticks around. He could have left, right? Yes, a part of it is because, it's another boy his age and, something unique has happened here and they kind of get on for a little bit, I suppose, and he follows him and all that. But, he sticks around because he cares. He wants to, help this child. But of course, through Martin, you do kind of gain a bit of insight or more insight into the philosophy of Johan, right? Because, these kids are really clearly impacted by Johan and they carry his outlook. And it's really quite jarring to see that he's removed the idea of consequences and the finality of death, right? It's kind of removed from their developing minds, though of course it's good to see a bit of breakthrough for Martin. And then of course, building on that, he kind of, establishes this idea of life being boring, right? Johan's the one who kind of makes him realize that, or he presents it in that manner rather. And then he also offers him an outlet for fun, right? Getting them used to the idea of death and getting them used to watching death as well, right? That one kid is actually excited to talk about seeing the eyes of someone who's about to die, right? It's a little bit disturbing how these kids are reacting to these things. And again, that's all on Johan. But, going back to Tenma and his approach with Dieter, ultimately, a bit of love goes a long way, doesn't it? And again, this is something that the lady at Nina's orphanage believed as well, right? That love is all you really need, right? That love is necessary in a child's upbringing. And, this idea of being the chosen and surviving these near-death experiences. Johan's had his fair share. So you see how he's kind of developed this, ideology, right? A lot of it seems to be projected through the idea of the rooftop game, right? He survived being shot, right? Though ultimately, Tenma, that's fate at work. Because of course, Tenma had a major hand in saving Johan, right? After he is shot. Johan certainly believes he's been chosen by fate, right? And he continues to play. To this day, he continues to play. And to him, or the way he's structuring it or establishing it or setting it up is that, it's a game, that I might die soon. This, Japanese man might be the one who might kill me. But the idea of it being framed as a game is that, he's seeing if he can survive this as well. Or rather, he feels that he is going to survive it because of fate being on his side, right? Over and over again. But yeah, ultimately it's great to see Dieter's newfound outlook on life, his empathy, kind of shine through here, right? Because, listen, Dieter used to be there as well, right? In a similar position to Martin, right? He was groomed to be quite cynical or to have quite a cynical view of humanity. But I think that feels like the right spot to end it off. It's really a great episode, man. A damn good episode. As you could tell by now, by the end of this, yeah, it had me really quite excited. Really quite excited. I'm really happy to be all in again, good to be back in the flow of things. But yeah, if you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access or full opacity or even timer-based full length, consider checking out the Patreon page and, you know, potentially supporting the channel as well in the process of it all. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also, links to social media, if that's your thing. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.